Kelly and I had a tradition: dinner and a night out with our friends Chuck and Beverly Conrad on the last Friday of each month. That night, we'd gone to Legal Seafoods for dinner. We laughed, had a bottle of wine, and told our usual jokes. Then we headed to Phoenix Landing for music, dancing, and cocktails, maybe a few too many for Kelly. Kelly looked stunning. Her tight-fitting red dress left little to the imagination. A bold choice, and I felt proud to have a wife who turned heads. We danced to a few upbeat songs, switching partners playfully. Once or twice, I ended up with Beverly, while Kelly ended up with Chuck. It was all innocent enough, until we got back to our table and saw a sudden commotion near the door. "What's going on?" Beverly asked, craning her neck. The DJ announced with a little fanfare that James Wilson, the new Patriots quarterback, had just arrived. The crowd erupted in whistles and applause. He strolled in, tall and confident. Chuck whistled low under his breath. "Oh man, didn't expect to see a celebrity here." Beverly stared at Wilson with a hungry expression. "He can put those boots under my bed any time," she said, voice breathy. Kelly sipped her drink. It was enough for her, and smirked. "Mine too." Chuck frowned, and I felt a twinge of annoyance. "Do I need to remind you ladies that you're married?" I said, forcing a casual smile. Kelly shrugged. "Just don't tell me you've never fantasized about flirting with a celebrity." "Actually, no," I said. "One day, Matt, you'll be a celebrity yourself when you finish your book." Beverly encouraged me. "Oh, I beg you," Kelly said, rolling her eyes. Suddenly, she sat up tall, practically bouncing in her seat. "Oh my God, he's coming here!" I turned, and sure enough, James Wilson had stood up from his booth at the far end of the club. He was making his way from table to table, stopping to sign autographs and pose for selfies. People were going nuts. He was handsome, with a confident smirk plastered across his face. He reached our table, and I braced myself. "Excuse me," he said, voice deeper in person than on TV. "Would you mind if I asked your lovely wife to dance?" My jaw tightened. I wanted to say, "Yeah, I mind, buddy." But Kelly was nodding so enthusiastically she was basically out of her seat already. Before I could open my mouth, she'd taken his hand, rising from the chair as if drawn by some magnetic force. They glided to the dance floor. At first, it was an upbeat track, and they moved, laughing and smiling at each other. But then the DJ switched to a slow song, and I watched Kelly lean into his arms, pressing her body against him like she'd known him forever. My hands curled into fists under the table. "Man, that's some bullshit," Chuck muttered. She laughed too loudly, leaning in so close I thought she'd climb in his lap. Then his hand slid over her butt, giving it a little squeeze. I stormed across the club. "Get your freaking hand off my wife!" I snapped, voice shaking. Wilson raised an eyebrow, looking me up and down. "It's a free country, pal. You got a problem?" Kelly smiled at me, soberly. "Matt, don't make a scene," I fired back, though my pulse was drumming in my ears. Wilson looked amused. "Buddy, if you could keep her satisfied, maybe she wouldn't be here, huh?" That set me off. I shoved him, ignoring how big he was. He shoved back, sending me stumbling into a bar stool. People started yelling. I saw red. I swung at Wilson. My fist connected with his jaw, a burst of pain radiating through my knuckles. He staggered, looked momentarily shocked. Then he threw a punch that nailed me right in the mouth. I tasted blood. We grappled, knocking glasses and bottles off the bar. At some point, he kneed me in the gut, and I gasped, losing my balance. The crowd around us roared with excitement or horror. I couldn't tell which. Then out of nowhere, Chuck slammed into Wilson, yanking him back with surprising strength. Chuck, the coach of the local basketball team, wasn't the kind of guy who jumped into fights without a reason. He always kept his cool. But now, his grip on Wilson's shirt was tight, his jaw clenched. "Think you could put your hands on another man's wife, huh?" Chuck snarled, throwing a wild punch. His face was twisted in rage. Wilson barely dodged, then drove a sharp elbow into Chuck's ribs. Chuck let out a grunt, but didn't back down. He seized Wilson's collar and yanked him close, their faces just inches apart. The bouncers finally muscled their way through the crowd, grabbing Wilson before he could throw another punch. One of them turned to me and Chuck. "You two, out, now!" As we stepped out of the restaurant, the crisp night air hit us, cooling our flushed faces. "Thanks, man," I said to Chuck, wiping the blood from my lip. He exhaled, shaking his head. "It was a hell of a mess." "Let her sleep it off," he muttered, settling Beverly in the back of his Jeep. Beside me, Kelly staggered, her heel catching on the doorway. I barely managed to grab her before she collapsed. "Jesus, Kelly," I muttered, tightening my grip around her waist. "I'm fiend," she slurred, lazily flicking her wrist in dismissal. She wasn't fine. I sighed, pulled open the passenger door and settled her into the seat. She slumped back, exhaling a contented sigh. The drive was silent except for Kelly's uneven breathing. Her head rested against the window, hair clinging to her damp forehead. She reeked of alcohol and Wilson's cologne. My grip tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I should say something. Shake her awake and demand answers. But what's the point? She wouldn't remember, or she'd pretend not to. I pulled into the driveway and cut the engine. As I opened her door, she stirred, pushing me away with a sluggish hand. "I can walk," she slurred, immediately stumbling into me. I slung her arm over my shoulder and hauled her to the front door. Inside, she kicked off her heels and collapsed face down on the couch without a word. I stood there for a moment, staring down at her. My wife. The woman who promised to love me. The woman who, an hour ago, was melting into another man's arms. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat, turned off the lights, and left her there to sleep off her mistakes. Next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee. The clock ticked mercilessly. Footsteps, slow, dragging, hesitant. Kelly shuffled into the kitchen, wrapped in the throw blanket from the couch, her bare feet whispering against the hardwood floor. Her hair was a mess, strands falling over her face, makeup smudged beneath tired eyes. She winced at the sunlight streaming through the window and rubbed her temples, groggy and disoriented. She barely glanced at me as she poured herself a glass of water, took a sip, and exhaled a slow breath. Then finally she turned. "What the hell happened last night?" she muttered, her voice raw with sleep. I didn't answer right away. Just took another sip of coffee, watching her. She frowned. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I set the cup down carefully. "You don't remember?" "Oh my God," she breathed. "What happened to your face?" I let out a humorless chuckle, shaking my head. "You don't remember," I repeated. Something in my tone made her straighten. "Matt, come on. You know how I get when I drink too much. I black out sometimes." "You black out a lot," I said flatly. Her jaw tightened, defensive now. "Oh, so now I'm a drunk? Because I went out and had fun?" I exhaled through my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. "You danced with Wilson. You let him put his hands all over you. And when I stepped in, you told me not to make a scene." She exhaled sharply, rubbing her face. "Jesus, Matt, you're acting like I cheated on you or something." She said it so easily, like it meant nothing. I watched her carefully. I was waiting for shame, for guilt, for something, but all I got was that same flat, irritated look like I was overreacting. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping against the floor. I grabbed my keys, shoving them into my pocket. I need to get to work. I had just pulled on my jacket halfway out the door when the sound of tires crunching over gravel made me pause. A red Jeep, Chuck. He stepped out, a Tupperware container in one hand, rolling up his sleeves with the other. "Hey," he said, nodding toward the house. "Beverly sent me with some soup for Kelly. Thought she'd need it." I glanced at the container, then up at him. His face was calm, unreadable, but not unfamiliar. "That's thoughtful," I said, voice even. Chuck exhaled, looking me over. "How's the jaw?" "Sore," I admitted. "How's the hand?" He flexed his fingers, cracked his knuckles. "I'll live." I let out a breath, not quite a laugh, not quite anything. We stood there a moment, just looking at each other. Last night, in the middle of that fight, Chuck had been right beside me, swinging when I swung, taking a hit when I took one. He had my back, just like always. "Last night was messy," he said, breaking the silence. "Yeah," I agreed. It was. I had to get to the newspaper office. Just another work day, another deadline. Last night still weighed on me, but at least work would keep my mind off it. Chuck stayed behind with Kelly. I didn't think twice about it. He was like a brother to me. I trusted him. So I left. But a few blocks away, I realized I'd forgotten my press badge. I turned the car around, pulling back into the driveway faster than I should have. Killing the engine, I jogged up the steps, already reaching for my keys. Then I heard voices. I froze. Through the cracked kitchen window, I saw them, Chuck and Kelly. They were arguing. Chuck's back was to me, broad shoulders tense. Kelly stood in front of him, arms crossed, her face set in a scowl. "I don't know what you want me to say," she snapped. "I was drunk, okay?" Chuck's voice was lower, harder to hear, but the frustration was clear. "That's not an excuse, Kelly. You crossed the line and you know it," Kelly scoffed. "Oh, really?" I stepped inside, making my presence known. The second Kelly saw me, her posture stiffened. Chuck turned around, expression carefully neutral. What's going on? I asked, keeping my voice even. Chuck looked at me, then at Kelly, then back at me. I was telling her she needs to treat you better, he said. A simple answer. Direct, logical. But something in the way he said it, off. Like he was testing the words as they left his mouth. Like he was waiting to see if I'd buy them. I studied him for a beat. My best friend. The guy who stood beside me in fights. Who had my back for years. Why would he lie? I pushed the thought down and nodded. I appreciate it, man, but I'll handle my wife myself. Chuck held my gaze for a second longer. Then he gave a small nod and stepped back. Yeah, sure. All right, he said. I'll see you later. He walked past me, heading for the door. Kelly didn't look at him. Kelly said nothing. She was standing there, arms crossed, her expression tight, like she was waiting for me to start. Fine. It kills me when you don't respect yourself. She exhaled sharply. I was drunk, Matt. You're always drunk, I shot back. Her eyes flared. Oh, so now I have a problem? You tell me, she scoffed, shaking her head. You know what? Maybe I wouldn't drink so much if I wasn't so stressed all the time. I let out a dry laugh. Oh, right. Now it's my fault. Yeah, actually, it is. She took a step forward, jabbing a finger at me. You dragged your sick father into our lives without even asking me. I have to tiptoe around the house, listen to his groaning from the guest room, watch money pour into his care while you sit around writing your book that never gets finished. I clenched my jaw. I hired a nurse, Kelly. She does everything. He doesn't even come inside the house. How exactly does he affect your life? She folded her arms tighter. The cost, Matt. That nurse is bleeding us dry. Meanwhile, you barely make anything from those articles, and your book? You've been working on it for years. Maybe instead of playing tortured writer, you should focus on making some real money. I felt something deep in my chest harden. I make enough. I work hard and pay all your bills, I said evenly. And I am working on my book. You could try supporting me instead of tearing me down every chance you get. She rolled her eyes. You want support? Finish something? My phone rang, cutting through the tension. I glanced at the screen. The paper. Where are you? I exhaled, gripping the phone tight. This isn't over, I said, already stepping toward the door. Kelly didn't reply. She didn't ask when I'd be back. She just stood there, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin, irritated line. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I fell in love with. The woman I married. The woman I used to laugh with over stupid inside jokes and hold close on cold nights. Now, she felt distant. Like she was standing on the other side of an invisible wall neither of us knew how to break down. And yet, despite everything, the drinking, the fighting, the way last night cut me deeper than I wanted to admit, I still loved her. I still believed we could fix this. If she wanted to. If we wanted to. Because marriage wasn't supposed to fall apart this easily. And I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. The newsroom buzzed with the usual chaos. Phones ringing, keyboards clacking, voices overlapping. I walked in, still feeling the weight of the morning pressing down on me, but I pushed it aside. Work was work. At least here things made sense. Matt, my office, now. I barely had time to set my bag down before my editor, Frank Delaney, called me over. His tone was sharp, impatient. I stepped into his office, closing the door behind me. He didn't waste time. I've got an assignment for you. He slid a folder across the desk. I picked it up, flipped it open. James Wilson. My stomach turned. You want me to interview him? I asked, forcing my voice to stay even. Frank leaned back in his chair, watching me carefully. He's the biggest name in sports right now. We get this exclusive and it's a win for the paper. You're the best guy for the job. I let out a slow breath, gripping the file a little too tight. I can't do it. Frank's brows lifted. What do you mean you can't? This is a golden opportunity, Matt. I shut the folder. Find someone else. The room went silent for a beat too long. Frank studied me like he was trying to figure me out. What's the problem? He asked. I exhaled through my nose. I just don't want the assignment. Frank let out a slow breath, shaking his head. Come on, Matt. You're not in a position to be picky. I need you on this one. I'm not doing it, I said, voice firm. Frank's expression darkened. You serious? Yeah. His jaw tightened. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Look, I don't know what's going on with you today, but I can't have my reporters turning down assignments because they don't feel like it. If you won't do the job, I don't have a job for you. I looked at him. feeling something settle in my chest. I nodded. Then I guess I don't work here anymore. His eyes flickered with something, surprise maybe, but I didn't wait for a response. I turned, walked out of his office, grabbed my bag, and left the newsroom without looking back. The moment the doors swung shut behind me, the weight of what I'd just done hit me. I was unemployed, no safety net, no backup plan, and yet, somehow, I felt lighter. That evening, I made my way to the guest house, the soft creak of the porch steps breaking the silence. The lights were dim inside, casting long shadows over the small living space. Dad was sitting in his chair, a blanket draped over his lap. His eyes flicked toward me as I stepped inside, filled with something I couldn't quite place. Urgency, maybe. Or fear. "Hey, old man," I said, forcing a small smile. "How's it going?" He tried to answer, but the words came out slurred, garbled, frustration flashing in his eyes as his mouth struggled to form what his mind already knew. I stepped closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, take your time." He shook his head, then reached for the notepad on the side table. His hand was shaky as he scrawled out a single word in uneven, jagged letters. "She." I frowned. "She?" His grip tightened on the pen. He tapped the paper, trying to emphasize it, his breathing growing shallow. I followed his gaze toward the kitchen counter where a used coffee cup sat next to a folded dish towel. The nurse had been here earlier. "You mean the nurse?" I asked, voice low. Dad blinked once. His fingers twitched around the pen, but he didn't write anything else. A cold feeling curled in my stomach. I wanted to tell myself I was overthinking it, that maybe he was just frustrated or confused or struggling to get his thoughts across. But I knew my father. Even after the stroke, when words failed him, his mind was still sharp. If he was trying this hard to tell me something, I couldn't ignore it. That night, I set up small home cameras in my house. Hidden, discreet, just to see. Because if Dad was warning me about something, I needed to know exactly what. 2 days later, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my laptop screen. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, hesitating. I didn't know what I was expecting. Some blurry footage of the nurse pocketing a few bills, maybe, or slacking off when she should have been taking care of my father. But the moment I hit play, my stomach twisted into a knot I didn't know I had. The grainy recording flickered to life. The timestamp in the corner showed the footage was from the afternoon before. The guest house door had been shut, my father asleep. The camera, hidden near the living room bookshelf, had a clear, unflinching view of my home, and standing in the middle of it was Chuck, wearing my robe. I blinked, barely processing the sight before something even worse unfolded on the screen. Kelly. She walked into the frame, barefoot, hair damp like she had just stepped out of the shower. She said something I couldn't hear, laughing softly as she ran a hand over his chest. Chuck smirked, pulling her in by the waist, and then, right there, on my living room table, they tore into each other like nothing else in the world mattered. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving only ice in my veins. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This wasn't just a drunken mistake. The way they touched, the way they moved together, it was familiar, practiced. My fingers curled into fists as realization sank in. Chuck, my best friend, the man who had thrown punches alongside me in a fight just nights ago, the man who had stayed behind with my wife after I left for work, and that night at the bar, was that why he jumped into the fight? Not just to help me, but because he had been jealous too? Had he watched Wilson with Kelly and felt the same fury that had burned in my chest? Had he wanted to be the only man touching her? And I had thought he was supporting me, defending me. Instead, he had been screwing my wife behind my back the entire time. The video kept playing, but I shut the laptop, my hands shaking. A cold, bitter rage curled in my stomach. I had seen enough. I drove to Chuck's house without thinking, barely feeling the road beneath me. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The rage in my chest burned hot, but beneath it, there was something worse, something hollow. Beverly answered the door, her face pale, eyes red and swollen. She must have seen it in my face, the way my jaw was locked, my breath unsteady. She didn't even ask why I was here. Instead, her voice cracked as she whispered, "You know?" I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. "Did you?" I asked, my voice tight, controlled. Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't try to deny it. Didn't try to soften the blow. She just covered her mouth with one hand and nodded, a quiet sob escaping her lips. "I only found out recently," she choked out. I didn't know how to tell you, Matt. I didn't know if you already knew or if..." She stopped herself, shaking her head. I exhaled sharply, raking a hand through my hair. My chest felt tight like I couldn't get a full breath. Chuck, my best friend, Kelly, my wife, the people I should have been able to trust most, and all this time they had been lying to us. Beverly wiped at her face, her hands trembling. Then, after a pause, she met my eyes with a strange, raw desperation. "We should make them pay," she whispered. I frowned. "What?" She swallowed hard, her expression shifting, anger flickering beneath the heartbreak. "We should get back at them, hurt them the way they hurt us." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You and me." I felt my pulse jump, but not for the reason she wanted. I knew what she was suggesting. The way she was looking at me, the way her hands fidgeted as if reaching for something. For someone. It would be easy, so damn easy. A moment of revenge. A way to even the score. Chuck and Kelly had already done their damage, already crossed the line 1,000 times over. But as I looked at Beverly, at the pain in her eyes, at the hurt twisting in her features, I saw a reflection of myself. And I knew the truth. "This isn't the answer," I said quietly. She blinked, surprised. "Matt, I know what they did," I interrupted, my voice steady now. "But sleeping together won't fix anything. It won't make the pain go away." I shook my head. "It'll just make us like them." Beverly let out a shuddering breath, her shoulders slumping. I could see it now. The brief flicker of guilt in her eyes, the way her hands clenched into fists, as she realized I was right. I reached for the door, pausing for just a second. "They don't deserve our respect," I murmured. "But that doesn't mean we should lose our own." I left before she could say anything else. Because I already knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I kept recording. At first, it was just to confirm what I already knew, to see it with my own eyes, to burn away any last traces of denial. But the more I watched, the more I realized they weren't even hiding it, not from each other, not from my home, not even from my father. That thought gnawed at me. The way he had written "she" on that paper, the urgency in his eyes. He knew, and if he knew, that meant he must have seen something. Maybe Kelly thought his stroke had left him too broken to notice. Maybe she thought his words were too scrambled to be believed. But I knew my father, and if he had hinted at her affairs, then he had proof of his own. I bought him a small voice recorder. "Just press this button when they come around," I told him, placing it in his hand. His fingers trembled slightly, but he gripped it tight, nodding. The next time I checked the footage, I expected to find the same thing I'd seen before. Whispers, stolen touches, kisses they thought no one else noticed. But what I found was worse. Chuck. In my house. Again. Kelly sat on the couch, laughing, swirling a glass of wine. Chuck stood in front of her, grinning like a fool. Then, he dropped to his hands and knees. I stared at the screen, unable to believe what I was seeing. Kelly clapped her hands like she was praising a child. Chuck wagged his hips like a tail, crawling toward her on all fours. Then, he barked. What the hell was this? Chuck whined like a damn puppy, nudging his head against Kelly's knee. She reached down, scratching his hair playfully before pulling a small piece of chocolate from her pocket and holding it up. "Good boy," she purred. Chuck sat back on his haunches, opened his mouth like a begging dog, and waited. I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse hammering in my ears. This wasn't just an affair. This was something else. Something twisted, something that made my skin crawl. I had all the proof I needed now, and soon they would both pay. The gymnasium was packed. The crowd buzzed with excitement, the energy electric as players warmed up on the court. Sneakers squeaked against the polished floor. Whistles blew. The scoreboard flickered to life. And then he walked in. Chuck. He led his team onto the court, chest puffed out like he owned the place, wearing that same damn confidence he always did. Like nothing could touch him. Like he wasn't a fraud. Like he wasn't about to lose everything. I kept my eyes on him, but I knew she was here too. Kelly. She had taken her usual seat in the stands, crossed her legs, and pretended everything was normal. She wasn't looking at me, not yet. Maybe she thought I wouldn't do anything. Maybe she thought I wouldn't dare. She was wrong. I waited until the pregame interviews began. I stood in the press area, holding my mic steady as Chuck approached. He barely spared me a glance. Just another routine interview before tip-off. I let the first couple of questions be easy, predictable, just enough to keep him comfortable. Then, when he least expected it, I asked, "Chuck, how do you feel about cheating? On the court, in the game, or, say, in marriage?" His smile faltered. His eyes flicked to me, sharp now, searching. He knew, but he wasn't ready to let go of the act just yet. "What kind of question is that?" he scoffed, forcing a smirk. "You serious?" I didn't blink, didn't smile. From the corner of my eye, I saw Kelly shift in her seat, her body tensed, her fingers tightening around the armrest. Her head snapped toward the court. She heard it too. I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit play audio my dad recorded. The audio my dad recorded crackled through the speakers, clear as day. Kelly's voice. "You know what's crazy? No one suspects a thing." Chuck, laughing. "I know, we've got the whole town fooled." Kelly. "They all think we're just good friends, the perfect spouses." Chuck. "If only they knew what really happens after those community get-togethers." Kelly, smirking. "Too bad they never will." The silence in the gym was thick. Then, an eruption of noise. Chuck's face went pale. I turned my head just in time to catch Kelly's reaction. The smugness wiped clean off her face, replaced by wide-eyed horror. She shot up from her seat like she could somehow stop what was coming, and then on cue, the screens lit up. Chuck stiffened, his body going rigid. Every big screen in the gym flickered, shifting from player stats to something else entirely. Chuck, on all fours, barking, whining, begging. For a second, the entire gymnasium froze. Then, it exploded. The first wave of laughter hit, followed by roars from the crowd. People stood, shouting, pointing, jeering. Cups of beer flew through the air, splattering across the court. Chuck turned, eyes wide, horror dawning across his face as he watched himself on the giant screens, as he saw himself crawling, tail wagging, licking Kelly's hand. "Shut it off!" he bellowed, turning to the AV booth. But it was too late. His team stared at him, stunned. Players whispered to each other. The referees tried to regain order, but the noise only grew. The game was over. Chuck stumbled back, his head snapping from screen to crowd to exit, like a hunted animal looking for a way out. His career, his reputation, everything he had built, shattered in an instant. And Kelly, she looked trapped, like she didn't know whether to run or stay, like she finally understood what was happening. I met her eyes and I smiled, because I wasn't done yet. I filed for divorce the next morning, no hesitation, no second thoughts. Kelly had made her choices. Now she would live with the consequences, but that wasn't enough. I wanted more. So I sued him. Alienation of affection. North Carolina was one of the last states that still allowed it. A rare, brutal law that let a betrayed spouse drag the other man into court and make him pay. Not just with guilt, with money. Chuck fought. Of course he did. He hired a lawyer, put on the act of a remorseful family man, tried to sell the idea that it was just a mistake between two people who got carried away. But the evidence didn't lie. Neither did the recording of his own voice laughing about how easy it was to fool everyone, or the footage of him barking for Kelly like a dog. The court ruled in my favor. Chuck had to pay. Big. His coaching career was already in ruins. No school wanted the guy who got publicly exposed as a cheating, submissive mess. But now his bank account was bleeding too. With the settlement money, I moved out with my father. Finally, I was free. No more breaking my back to pay for Kelly's shopping sprees, her wine-fueled nights, or the nurse she pretended was a burden. Now, I took care of my father myself, and for the first time in years, I had time. Time to sit down, to breathe, to write. I decided to write another book, and wrote it in just 1 month. The words poured out of me, faster than they ever had before, fueled by the fire of everything I'd been through, by the sheer momentum of finally being free. I finished my book, and it didn't just get published. It became a bestseller. A brutal, raw, no-holds-barred story about betrayal, about deception, about a woman who thought she could play two men like fools and walk away unscathed. People read it, they talked about it, they recognized her. Now everyone knew. Kelly wasn't just the woman who wrecked our marriage. She became the biggest liar in my novel. And this wasn't the end of my own story, it was just the beginning.